What is your main call to action that you have that you need on your homepage? What is the buyer journey as far as how you need them to flow through the website? Are you creating a blog or a podcast, or what is the regular content that's going to be there? And what other things do you maybe need? And I think people get stuck on figuring out exactly what tech they need as opposed to what functionality they need first. So do you need a scheduler? Do you need e-commerce? Do you need email opt-ins? Like, what are all of the things that you need from a business perspective? Think about that first before you start to go down the tech road.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade thinking beer brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klink proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klink.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 61 of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink. I'm really excited for today's episode because we're getting back to the content creation theme. Today, we're talking all about the hub for your online content, your website. Now, as I'm recording this, I am just wrapping up a redesign of my website with the help of today's guest. So I figured it would be a great idea to bring her on the show to talk about building or designing or redesigning your website and thinking about it from a higher level, meaning what do you need to be doing with your website? What do you need to be thinking about as you're creating a new website? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get there, this week's episode is brought to you by the Online Genius podcast community on Facebook. Now, I love coming to you every week and talking with you through this podcast and offering value and getting a chance to meet great guests like we have today. But I also like the chance to go deeper, to answer your questions directly, to have Q&As, to have other resources for you. And that's what the Facebook group is all about. So I'd love for you to join me. It's absolutely free. You can join by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. So with that, today's guest expert is Sami Bedell-Mulhern. She's the founder of the newly launched The First Click, Learning Digital Marketing the Easy Way. Her passion is helping small business owners and entrepreneurs get back to the basics of marketing and to remove the overwhelm that often comes with it. She wants to help you avoid shiny object syndrome and stop fretting that you've got an outdated website. Her free resources and tools can get you back on track and making sales. Welcome to the show, Sami.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Bobby. It's great to be here.
Now, I'm guessing that you're thanking your lucky stars that you're about done with me because I've got to be a difficult client.
No, actually, what I appreciate about you so much is you get a lot of the text. A lot of times people don't even know what they want. And so we have to go through several iterations to kind of get them there. So you're definitely not a difficult client.
Well, I think I'm difficult in the sense that I wasn't sure what I wanted up front, but after we had done a little bit of work, I figured out what I wanted. So
we got there. Well, what's interesting and what we'll kind of touch on later, but I think you were also going through a kind of change in your business as you were trying to change your website. So it was kind of took a little detour to get to where we're going, but I think the end product's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think the problem was one of the things we're going to talk about is I kind of hadn't done some of the things or thought through some of the things that you would say people really need to have thought through. I thought I had, but I've changed them since. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, I wasn't necessarily ready at the beginning. But what we're going to talk about today really is designing a website that's really built to convert, built to get something for my listeners. And in most cases, it's going to be sales, but maybe it's just getting people on an email list. But the idea is building a website with a purpose in mind. And so why don't I start there? What role should a website play for your online business?
I think that's totally up to your business. So a website can serve lots of different purposes. It can be a sales tool. Like you said, it could be an email generator. Some people just want it to be a portfolio where they're not actually driving leads from it, but they're just having it as a place where people can research them. So really the website functionality is really based off of what your business goals are and what you need it to do.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, though, that with most online entrepreneurs, and I guess there are some entrepreneurs out there who are, just want a portfolio. But for the most part, their website is going to be meant to try to get someone to take some kind of action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let me start with a very basic question that I always like to ask web developers. And it's something I hear a lot of people ask in various groups I'm in. They always want to know, should they go with a Squarespace, a Weebly, a Wix, or should they go with WordPress? What is your thinking on that?
Yeah, so Squarespace, Weebly, Wix, like they definitely have a place. Their builder is much easier. They're also much more limited in customization and ability to kind of take that website with you to the next level. So what we find a lot of times is people that have built their own websites on those platforms typically have to do a full-on rebuild at some point as their business grows and the functionality of their website needs grow. We build all of ours in WordPress. I think it's up to 30% of all websites that are out there are built on WordPress. You have so much customization options with it, and it can really do anything. So you can start with a 1 or 2 page website if that's all you need at the beginning, but then you can feel comfortable knowing that down the road, you can keep it where it's at and just add functionality to it.
Yeah. And one of the arguments, and you were kind of saying it subtly there, but one of the arguments I've heard from web developers on why you should go with WordPress is because it's open source. So in a sense, if whoever is hosting my website right now gets mad at me, I can just say, okay, give me my files and I can go somewhere else and host it. Whereas if Squarespace, for example, goes out of business tomorrow or gets mad at me and they're hosting my website, I can't just take my files with me, can I?
Yeah, I don't know specifically about that, but yeah, I think they could. And I also think that going to the open source piece, because it's open source, there's an entire community of people that are building customization options as well. So you're not just relying on one company to provide all the solutions that you need. If I'm trying to build something and I don't find a plugin that works for it, then I can either build a plugin myself or, work with some other people to get that going. So you can really do anything.
Yeah. And I think one of the big drawbacks of WordPress, I think, is going away. When I first started my own law firm, I went with WordPress. I think I may have gone with Wix right up front, but then quickly went to WordPress. But I feel like back then there weren't a lot of builders. And by builders, I mean, there was no kind of front end builders like a drag and drop option. So you had to find a theme you liked. And then I actually spent time learning HTML coding to literally move things, let's say move them 6 inches over, which was not an ideal use of my time. I feel like nowadays you don't really have to do that anymore.
I mean, I think if we're going to be real here, WordPress is definitely not the easiest when you first get started. It's kind of tricky to find where some settings are. It's hard to kind of understand where things are going, but you can learn it pretty quickly. Like you said, there's lots of courses out there that will teach you how to use WordPress. But now the new builder that's WordPress 5.0 that's out is much more intuitive. And there's a lot of great just standard themes that are, like you're saying, the front end visual builder that make it much more intuitive. So you don't have to do the back and forth anymore. You don't have to look at the page, go back and edit it, and then go take a look at the front end and see if you like the changes you made. And you're right, the settings are so much easier. I'm not a coder. I have a developer that works alongside me that does all the coding, and we don't have to do much custom coding at all anymore to get very different websites for different clients.
Yeah. So, and just listeners, so that you know, my website is moving. I was using Thrive Themes, and Thrive has a visual builder called Thrive Architect. I think it is now. It was something else before. And I just decided I was going to do a rebuild, partly because there was just something wrong with the tech on my side, somewhere between my host and Thrive. They didn't agree with each other. But we moved to Divi and the Divi builder, and it is an unbelievably easy visual builder. Well, I mean, it takes some getting used to, but once you're used to it, you can do most things.
100%, yeah.
And that's what you suggest, right, Sami?
We use Divi for all of our websites because they're definitely a growing company and they are adding new features all the time, which is fantastic. And the customization is really easy. Where the settings are on each page is really easy. And for our clients, when we're done with the site, the training that we give them to be able to make their own edits, like there's so much that they can do on their own, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It seemed intuitive to me. And actually, listeners, I was joking with Sami. I actually first interacted with Divi I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, maybe more, I bought one of their themes, but I think that was before they had their visual builder. And as we were going through the rebuild, all of a sudden it hit me as I was looking at the back end. And I threw my hands up back then because I couldn't figure it out. But with the builder, it's so simple.
Well, now they even have the newest feature, I think that's only been out for a few months, is you literally can just clone and duplicate an existing page. So now if you've got a blog running on your website and you can just duplicate an existing one that's already got all the formatting and stuff in, and then you're just replacing the content. So it makes it really easy.
Yeah. And that's really nice. And so if people don't want Divi, if people are going to look around for different builders, what are some of the common front end builders that you hear people talking about that can make it possible to use WordPress and kind of have a drag and drop kind of builder?
Yeah, Beaver Builder is definitely the other one that's out there that a lot of people use. That's going to be similar.
And so here's the other question. Like with Divi, for example, you can use the Divi builder without the Divi theme. Is that right?
So if you're going to do Divi, you have to pay for the membership. So it's an annual fee, or you can have a lifetime membership. And with that, you can have as many sites on it as you want. I think it's like $79 a year. So it's not crazy expensive, but with that, you get access to their customer support as well. So they can help you, and they have pretty good customer support. And again, like, they have new features that are coming out all the time. The other piece that you get with that is they have a plugin called Bloom, which creates a ton of email opt-in options for you and syncs to all of the email service providers. And they have a plugin called Monarch, which customizes all of your social sharing on all your pages. So you get a lot with it.
Yeah, although we did discover that in my rebuild, because I'm using Kartra, which is kind of one of the new kids on the block, we can't seamlessly integrate between the two. Right. But yeah, I remember looking through it. They have most of the major email service providers linked in. And is Beaver the same way? Is it something that comes with themes, or do you just use that on top of some other?
Yeah, Beaver Builder is also a fee with it, and then you get the theme. So basically, they're more like plugins than themes. So if you go to their websites, you can download pre-made templates that exist, but it's not like a theme that you upload and then all the pages are kind of pre-populated and you just kind of go pick and choose the ones that you want.
Yeah. And I think what we did with mine, I mean, we took one of the existing kind of one of the Divi themes, but then, I mean, you wouldn't even really know it by looking at it anymore that it's kind of was that one. So now, I mean, I think that's a good discussion there, but you were talking with me in advance of this call or advance of this recording about the 4 things that people should do before either building or redesigning their website. And what are those 4 things? Let's go over them quickly, and then we'll kind of take a deeper dive on each one.
Sure. So the first thing that I think everybody needs to think about is, what is the actual function that you need your website to do? The second thing is understanding who your ideal customer is. The third is taking a look at your analytics for your existing site, or if you don't have an existing site, thinking about some market research. And the fourth is organizing your branding.
Okay, and so let's go down those in order. So the first one you mentioned is understanding kind of the function or functionality you want from your website. What do you mean when you say that?
So really understanding, what is your main call to action that you have that you need on your homepage? What is the buyer journey as far as how you need them to flow through the website? Are you creating a blog or a podcast, or what is the regular content that's going to be there? And what other things do you maybe need? And I think people get stuck on figuring out exactly what tech they need as opposed to what functionality they need first. So do you need a scheduler? Do you need e-commerce? Do you need email opt-ins? Like, what are all of the things that you need from a business perspective? Think about that first before you start to go down the tech road. Because we've been there, right? You spend 6 hours and all of a sudden you're like, I still don't know which one I need because there's just too much out there. Yep. So think about exactly what it is you need first. So that way, when you are doing the research, you can clearly take a look at the features and say, nope, this isn't going to work for me. This doesn't have this, or I need that. It just will make it a lot easier.
Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine that there's some other things that would fit in. Like, for example, if your website is all about your podcast and that is your primary function, I know I don't even remember what it's called, but I think John Lee Dumas has a company that actually, or he's part of a company that his website's built for podcasters. So that might be something to consider. But obviously, if you're not a podcaster, that's not somewhere to go.
Well, and I think the important thing here too is also to understand, just like you're saying, what you don't need it to do, right? So don't get distracted by other people's websites that have all these shiny bells and whistles. If you don't need them, don't do it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but I would imagine on websites like most everything else, we're probably better off taking somewhat a minimalist approach. Only
100%.
Include stuff that you need. Don't include stuff you don't need. Is that right?
100%. I would say that 100%, because, people get sidetracked. Okay, so let's just talk about chat boxes, for example, right? They're extremely powerful tools, and they're really great at providing customer service and customer experience. If you're not sitting in front of your computer all day, as if that's not your job, or if you have nobody to man it, don't do it, right? Like that's going to actually make for a worse customer experience. So really understanding, what your limitations are as a business owner or an entrepreneur, what you have capacity to do, and what you can really make for that good customer experience is going to be more impactful than just having a website with all the bells and whistles.
Yeah. And also one thing that I learned that I dove into at some point, and I'm going to dive into a little bit more, probably not on the tech side in a future episode about SEO, but is load speed for your pages is important. And
it's extremely important.
The more stuff you got on there, the longer it's going to take to load. It's going to get bogged down. People aren't going to like it. So avoid the bells and whistles if you don't need them.
Yeah. And then the other thing to think about too is to understand that your website needs to be mobile friendly, and that user experience needs to be strong too. So when you're thinking about all of the functionality you want for your website, understanding how it plays on multiple devices is important. Not difficult. It's just something you need to think about.
Yeah. And a quick tip for listeners, if you're someone who's going to try to do this yourself, don't put text into images in the actual images you upload. Yes. If you do, all that text gets shrunk down on the mobile version. I learned that the hard way myself when I was first building websites myself.
Well, and not to get too SEO techie, but when you put text on top of an image and upload that as a single file, then you're losing that opportunity to have that language be read by Google or whatever search engine it is. Right.
Well, we can just say Google. I mean, I know that there's this thing out there called Bing, but I don't believe anybody still uses it.
No.
So, I mean, is there anything else about understanding kind of the functionality that you want your website to serve that we should be talking about?
Yeah. So to kind of then jump in the middle, because it kind of goes between the two. So number 2 is knowing who your ideal customer is. So what we like to recommend too is really getting out there and taking a look at a lot of different websites, because most likely you're not a marketer by trade. And so your brain isn't necessarily thinking in that way, right? You're thinking about the product you want to sell and who your customer is. So getting out there and really taking a look at a lot of websites, and not just websites within your industry, but understanding the websites that maybe your ideal customer is also going to, and taking a look at those websites, and really just taking screenshots and writing down ideas of things that you see that are visually appealing to you, functionality that you like, and keeping as much of that, what you like, and then also what you don't like. Those things are going to be really important, whether you build the site by yourself or if you hire somebody to do it. To have that kind of all that information written down is really helpful in kind of saving you money in the design process and getting you exactly what you want at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think the key there is, you said, go to a lot of different websites. Don't go to one person's site and say, I'm going to copy this, because that's generally not going to be a good idea.
And get outside your industry. So for example, I have different brands that I just love what they do and the way that they speak to their customers and kind of how they treat their customer experience. And they're not in the marketing world. So you can really learn or change things, right? It's a noisy world out there. So setting yourself apart from everybody else in your industry isn't always a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, if your website looks exactly like everybody else in your industry's website, I mean, I guess there's some value to that. It's not going to shock anyone, but it's also not going to get anybody's attention.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think then that's a good place to segue into the next kind of thing, which is, you said, understanding your ideal customer, or I would call it your ICA, your ideal customer avatar. Why is that important, and how do you go about doing that?
So, Bobby, you've been doing this right now with your website launch, right? Language.
No, I haven't done any of this. I don't know anything about what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yes, you do. The language you use on your website is extremely important. People are so bombarded with information that they're going to process your site pretty quickly. And they're either going to see something they like and scroll down, which is what you want, or they're not going to see it and they're going to move on. And so if you're not hitting your ideal customer and smacking them right in the face with the website to say, I see myself here. Oh, I want to learn more about this. He's speaking directly to me. Then they're going to move on. So you really need to hone in and review your website and see, am I speaking the right language? Are the visuals that I'm using going to be appealing to my ideal customer? And does it just make sense for them?
Yeah. And I think it's also important that we talk about here, but don't play it safe necessarily. That's not what you're saying here. You're saying just understand the language they use, understand the words that they're going to use and that are going to resonate with them.
Right. And also there's a great app called the Hemingway app, which is a free, you just type it into Google, you'll get there. And it does a really good job of taking just put in whatever it is, your homepage copy, your blog copy, your email copy, whatever, put it in there and it will help you understand kind of the right grade level that you should be writing for. Are you speaking in a language that people can process quickly? Because it's not that you're saying you're going to talk down to people, but you want them to be able to process the information as quick and as easily as possible.
Right. You don't want people to have to think really hard when they're looking at your website.
Correct.
And so when you understand your ICA, it's going to affect messaging. Is it going to affect design other than kind of like the imagery? Does that affect how you put the website together?
Well, I mean, if you think about designing a website for females that are 45 to 65, that are empty nesters and, are nearing retirement or something, right? Versus a male who's 25 to 45, whatever. So the design elements, the style, the look and feel is definitely going to be different depending on who your customer is, as well as the language.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I struggle with, candidly, because quite honestly, my audience skews very female, but obviously it wouldn't be authentic to me to have a website that was feminine. So, right. But I mean, I think you can walk that line.
Well, I think with the language that you use and the way that you speak to people, you also want to show your personality, right? People buy from people that they feel connected to, that they feel like they trust, that they feel like they're a part of their world. So finding that balance is important as well.
Yeah. And, for listeners, if you haven't yet visited the new website, when you hear this, go ahead and go over to my new website and you'll see when you land on my homepage, the first thing you now see is a caricature of me with a huge head, which is kind of funny. And
oh my gosh, it's so good.
And so good. And that was part of what this redesign was about for me, was adding my personality into my website, because before I used the word we instead of I, in spite of the fact that for a long time, I mean, if you follow me, you know this, there was no we, it was me. And so I think that's important. So once you've kind of understood your ideal customer, what you said the next thing is to dive into the analytics or do some market research. What is this?
Right.
What are you doing in this phase?
So at this point, you have in your head, you think you've got the best product, you have the best ideas for how you want to talk to your customer about it. And so you kind of have the theories in place, right? So now you need to take it to the step of, okay, are my theories actually what my audience is, how they're behaving or who they are? And so if you have an existing website, I really hope you have Google Analytics attached to it, because it's a very powerful tool. But going into your analytics and taking a look at things like, where is your traffic coming from? Like with regards to, is it organic search where people are just searching in keywords and they're finding you? Are they directly typing in your URL? Are they coming to you from social media or other websites? So knowing where your referral traffic is coming from, you can dive into the demographics of who they are, age, gender, location, where they're coming from. If that's important to your business, maybe you're selling things online, but you're also targeting a specific geographical area. And then the one that I love is really diving into the pages that they're visiting and where they're spending a lot of time, because that will really tell you where people are already interacting with on your website and maybe what products or services are most valuable, so that you can kind of tweak and rearrange how things are represented on your website.
Yeah, I think that's all makes sense. And another kind of tidbit tool I would give to people is if you have a Facebook page, looking at the insights on that page may be useful as well, because I think that'll give you a good sense of who is following you,
right? Even
if not on your website.
Well, and that's a great point too, because analytics that come from social media to Google Analytics are not very accurate, because as you know, Facebook likes to keep people on the platform. So if I'm on my mobile device and I see it like a link to your podcast and I click on it, it actually opens up a page within Facebook as opposed to directing me to your podcast page on your website.
Right.
So you don't actually see that traffic reflected. So that's a really great point.
Well, and the reason why I thought about that is in doing some work for Facebook advertising recently, I was talking about a new Facebook ads manager I had on board, and we did this work, and it was kind of interesting when you looked at the pages that people liked or had interacted with for the people who liked my page. It kind of sent the message that a big part of my crowd are people who currently have a job, but have an entrepreneurship as kind of a side hustle or they're working to do something. And so again, it gives you those kinds of insights that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't done that work.
And if you're not an analytical person, don't freak out. So the interface on Google Analytics, the homepage, really gives you an awesome snapshot of a lot of these things right up front. And so you can really see a lot of useful information without feeling overwhelmed, and then quick links to dive deeper if you want to. So it'll give you a location page with a map. And if you click on the United States, then it'll drill it out by state. And then you can just click on the state and it'll drill it out by city. So it's not overwhelming. Don't be scared. I promise you can do it.
Yeah, I have Google Analytics and I use it at about that level. I mean, I look at the source of my traffic and the pages is really what I'm looking at mostly. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I think you can do that. And what if you don't yet have a website? How do you do market research at that point?
Yeah. So if you don't yet have a website, then I would just recommend, reaching out and seeing if you can interview a few people that might fit your ICA, asking them if this is the type of product or service that they would want, even showing them if you have mock-ups or if you have language, just sharing some of that information and just saying, does this make sense for you? Do you resonate with this? How do you feel about this? Because what you don't want to do is spend a bunch of time and energy building this website that you think is going to be awesome. And then you launch it and then you don't get that traffic, or people aren't, staying on the pages, or people are bouncing a lot. Like, you don't want to have that. You want to make sure that you kind of know that what you've thought is true is true.
I mean, is there a role for doing something like setting up a coming soon page or just a landing page while you're trying this out? Or
for sure. Yeah. If you already have your domain, put up a page with a contact form and like website coming soon, a little blurb about who you are and what you do, and a way for them to get in touch with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's, somebody that I know who's been trying to get her page up for about 6 months working with a designer, and she's had a coming soon page that whole time. So not ideal, but better than nothing.
Well, then at least you can start to do other marketing. And when you send people somewhere, it goes to something, right? As opposed to a page that just says like GoDaddy, like this domain is taken, right?
Yeah, that would not be ideal.
Right.
Well, and I mean, I guess one other thing. So since you're talking about looking at analytics and market research, I mean, if you have an existing website, is it worth putting in kind of a heat map sensor to see where people are paying attention, or is that not worth it?
Absolutely. And Crazy Egg has a good one. And I think they have a free trial. So if you are just doing a redesign, it's awesome because you can put the code in and then track it, I think for 14, might even be 30 days. But it's really cool because it shows you not just what page people are landing on, but where they're spending most of their time on that page, which is super cool.
I don't know how they do that stuff, but I've seen heat maps. And, listeners, if you don't know exactly what this is, it's basically going to show you kind of green, clear, green, and orange up to red. It is showing you theoretically where people are spending their most time actually looking at your website. And
I think it tracks where their mouse is hovering too, because even on your main navigation, you'll see differences in the different tool or the different names on your menu. It'll be darker on some than others.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that, but it makes sense that they can do that. And, I was thinking about, you had me thinking about something else, but I've lost it. I may come back to it later, but it was something related to this. There are a lot of tools out there that you can use to really track things and see, here's what it was. This is more an SEO thing, but it might go more into kind of analytics and market research. You could go to something like Ahrefs. That's just Ahrefs. And then you can see what pages are linking to your website. That'll probably give you a view of the kinds of people who are going to be coming and where your traffic's coming from as well.
Yep. Majestic is another great tool for that as well.
Okay.
Yep.
And I don't remember, Ahrefs, I think, used to have a free trial. I don't know if it does anymore.
Yeah, we use SEMrush, but it's very limited in what you can do for free. But I know Majestic, if you type in your website, will give you not a whole backlink report, but it'll definitely give you all that information, as well as trust scores and domain scores and all that good stuff.
And so I mean, listeners, that'll give you a good sense to say, here's where potentially people are coming to my website from. So it's a good source for that.
And the other thing I want to say is once you've done these first three things and you take a look at your existing website, you may find that maybe you don't really need to rebuild your website. Maybe you just need to tweak some copy. Maybe people are hitting where you want them to hit on the website, and it's maybe changing a sequence here or an email there. So the reason why these are so important is because it's really going to help you determine, kind of from an objective standpoint, do I really actually need to rebuild my website, or do I just need to make some tweaks?
Yeah. So in other words, you can figure out whether you need to spend either a bunch of time or a bunch of money to rebuild a website, or if that's really not worth your time and money at this point in your business. So I think that's a valuable tip.
Yep.
And then the last thing you said is kind of collect and have consistent branding.
Right.
What do you mean by that, and where does that come in?
So branding is, it's definitely important. I don't want you to spend hours, looking through color palettes and fonts. Go to fonts.google.com. Those are going to be Google friendly. Pick one, move on, right? But it's important to have that consistency. So you want people to see your website, see your social, see your email campaigns, whatever it is, your print ads, and you want them to be able to understand that they all go together, right? You don't want to have people going to multiple pages of your website and one color blue here is a little different from the blue on that page, and this font's not consistent and the headers aren't the same. So really just pulling those assets together, it's going to save you a ton of time in the long run, because then you can just utilize it across the board in all of your marketing activities.
Yeah. And so a little tip that I'll give people to take it further on the fonts, go to the Google fonts, find those first, but then after you've done that, make sure, like if you use Canva, that they're available in Canva. And I think Canva lets you use all the Google fonts, but they may not. And if you have some other provider, like I use Kartra for my landing pages and sales pages and things like that. And we discovered, Sami and I, as we were doing the redesign, some of the fonts we chose at first for the website weren't going to work there.
Right.
So had to find one that I could have so that I could have the same look and feel across my different channels. So That's kind of the deeper point there. And is there anything to having consistent branding that's beyond that, or is that really it? Just make sure it's the same across.
I mean, I preach consistency. And I also preach quality over quantity. So taking a little bit of time to really hone in on that is going to save you a ton of time in the long run. Because, for example, if you're using Divi, you can literally plug in your main font. Well, you can with most, but you can plug in the fonts, what you want your header font to be, what you want your body font to be. You can plug in all of your colors. So then when you're editing pages and changing things out on your website, it's all right there. You don't have to go back and figure out what the codes were and what the fonts were. It's all saved right there for you. And you can just keep chugging along.
Yeah. Or you just get like me, and I know the hex codes for my 3 colors, like
oh my
back of my hand.
More power to you.
Well, unlike you, I'm not having to remember them for everybody, but
yeah.
But no, I like numbers. So, and listen, if you don't know what I'm talking about, a hex code is basically it's a pound sign or hash sign, whatever you're going to call it, followed by 6 numbers, and that's the designation for colors. And so,
for web, yep.
Yeah, for the web. And so I know my orange, my blue, my gray, and then white is the last one. That one's easy, but yep. I love that. Now, one other thing, because, Sami, I know you have resources to help people do it themselves. You also have coaching, and then you also have, you'll do it all for them. Mm-hmm. How should someone decide, should they try to tackle this themselves, or should they hire someone to do it for them, or something in between?
So we always work with our clients and our students on really first understanding, what do you have the capacity to do, and what is your budget? Like, let's get real. Like, if you don't have thousands of dollars for a budget or for a website, you don't. But that doesn't mean you can't have something that's really functional and easy to use. So what we recommend is, if you just need a 1 or 2 page website to get it up there, I would just try to do it yourself if you can. There's a lot of free tools and cheap resources. Like, I know Udemy has a free Divi course, I think, if you just look it up. If you're trying to do like a blog and you need a podcast and you need e-commerce, or if there's some other tech things that you want, I highly recommend at least consulting with a web developer. A lot of them will give you a free discovery session, or will offer to consult with you for a certain amount of hours to help you with it. But like I said, understand that you'll spend hours just trying to research the tools you need. And so think about that in your timing as far as what it is that you want to do. And then it might just be the case where you need to find somebody to build a website for you. Just make sure that you're talking them through the functionality and who your customer is so that you really get the product you want, as opposed to a product that just serves the SEO robots or what have you, because you want to serve the user experience first. Everything that Google is doing is to provide better user experience. So as long as you're providing for that, you'll be good to go. I know that's kind of not the answer, but
well, no, I think it's a good answer. And what I'll share with listeners, so some of the stuff like in this rebuild, I had someone do a design for a sales page for me before. So there were a lot of elements that I could use. But before that, I'd always done it myself. And I'll just give you some people some very basic thoughts of the kinds of differences if you do it yourself versus get a designer to do it. So if you do it yourself, unless you have design capability, all your backgrounds are either going to be a solid color, a picture with an overlay, or maybe just a one-way gradient.
Yeah.
Whereas a designer is going to do things where they're, really interesting gradients. And you may not realize that's a big deal, but those little things make it look so much nicer. So if you can afford a designer, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. And I think you only know what you know too. So the benefit of going with a designer as well is they've seen other things. They've seen things that work. They can guide you in the direction to say, okay, this on a mobile device is never going to happen. Right. So we can do it this way. And so it's just that expertise and removing that overwhelm. And depending on where you're located, there's pretty reasonable WordPress developers out there that don't charge a crazy arm and a leg.
Yeah. And so there's all that. And again, so, and Sami, you kind of have you do it all, and most people do, but theoretically you could also hire a designer to design it for you and give you a Photoshop file, which has everything. And then you could try to build it, or you could, if you're a good designer but can't build it, you could do the design and have someone else build it for you. So 100%. There are a lot of options out there. So, But you made a joke there at the beginning about the hours you'd spend doing the tech, or you might spend hours trying to figure out some silly little piece of code you have to, some little change.
And then it breaks something else. And then you're like, what just happened? And it's because you put a comma in the wrong spot, but you can't see it anymore. It's all good stuff.
You're bringing flashbacks.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I when I first built my websites, it was so bad. I did all those things. And like I said, I would literally find coding to move stuff from the left to the right, which, not a good use of my time at all. But I think nowadays it's much easier. So I appreciate that feedback. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, Sami, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So as we're talking, I'm also in the process of launching the First Click website. So it should be live when this goes, but if it might not be. So the firstclick.net is that website. Otherwise, we have a private Facebook group. If you just search for the First Click, that's where we're going to be doing a ton of free trainings and resources throughout the year. We do a monthly masterclass in there. So that's a great place to go because, like I said, you go down the rabbit hole of tech, and to have a community online that you could just go to and say, I need to do this. How do I do it? Is extremely valuable. So that's what we're creating there. So definitely check that out. And we've got more good stuff to come this year.
Yeah. Well, and you're going to have a course at some point that's going to teach people what they need to know, right?
Yeah. So we're beta testing a Divi course. If anybody's interested, just go to that Facebook group and message me. We're working on the sales pages right now. So that'll be an 8-week beta test on building your website with Divi. And then we'll launch the full course in June.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's a resource that's going to be available for people. If you're not yet to the point that you need to redesign, but maybe will in a few months, that's definitely worth listening to or, paying attention to. Sami, it's been a pleasure. If you had parting advice for people about building a website, what would it be?
I think, like you alluded to earlier, keep it simple. People just want to find information easily. They don't need all the bells and whistles. So don't get sidetracked with that and thinking you have to have kind of the, Lamborghini of websites. Keep it simple and make sure you understand the actions you want people to take. And if you do those two things, then your website will definitely convert much better for you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think simplicity is important generally, but I also think clarity over cleverness. And this kind of fits in too.
100%.
In your design, I see people use some flowery text and I look at it and I'm like, I literally can't even read that.
Right.
And so, I think be careful with things like that. So I think that's great advice.
And I think like you and I were talking about prior, once your website launches, have people try to break it.
Yep.
Because you want to have all of that stuff done before it's like your high dollar ticket customer coming through the door saying this doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think a lot of people are worried about that, are worried about it being perfect. Your website's never going to be perfect.
No.
I feel quite certain there are typos on my website right now. I'm going to work like heck to try to find them. And I've got a bunch of people who've offered to take a look, to do that, to try to break buttons and find anything that's not functioning. And so, we're recording this on a Friday and we're hopefully pushing it live today. And I'm going to have my folks over the weekend really try to break it. And so that's my plan. So you should do the same. And
because think about when you write anything, right? You can't proofread your own stuff because you've seen it too many times. And the same is true with your website. You're not going to see the typos. You're not going to see the missing links because you know where you want everything to go. So you're just going to kind of assume that it's already doing that.
Yeah. Well, and I'll share a story that's not about a website here, but will maybe make people feel better. So when I launched my membership site, which is now gone, but when I launched it and there were all of these templates that were included and all of these pages. And then so I launched it and then people, would email me every once in a while and say, hey, I found this typo. And at first I was freaking out because I was like, oh crap. And they're like, no, of course there's going to be a typo. I mean, I had something like, 150 pages of templates that they were getting and and so there's no, I don't want to say there's no way, but
there's no way. There's no way.
The chances of not having, something. And I think it was like one time there was a weather that had become a wither. And, it's just, stuff like that, people will understand, but get your real core supporters to try to break it and find that stuff for you. So
100%.
Well, Sami, it's been a pleasure. So other than that, where can people follow you online or get in touch with you other than the Facebook group or firstclick.net? Firstclick.net. Sorry.
You know what? I believe everything will be switching over to the First Click marketing. Okay. So I'll get you all our newest social handles as we get those transferred. We're going through a rebrand right now and it's super fun and awesome. I'm so excited about what we're doing, but I'm right there with you guys and we share a lot of that, our ups and downs with redoing our website and our branding and our struggles through digital marketing and what we're testing. So I'll get you the updated links, but the Facebook group's probably the safest place to go.
Okay. Yeah. And listeners, I will have all the links to everything and all the info that we can get from Sami in the show notes as always. So that's it for this week's episode. Again, if you're enjoying the show, I hope you'll go and subscribe and give it a rating and review. And also join me in the community. Again, it's youronlinegenius.com/community. And from there, you'll be able to get access to me, kind of go deeper on the issues we talk about and make sure that your business is protected.
Well, and one thing I want to add, sorry. Make sure you get in touch with him because your website also has to have legal stuff in it. So if you're building a new website, check in with him on what it needs to have.
Yeah, well, I hope most people who are listening to me here know that. And we'll be talking about that in the group this week. So you'll see that. That's the kind of thing that you'll get in the group to make sure that you're fully aware of that. So, and she's right. You need, at a minimum, you have to have a privacy policy, but you should also have a terms of use and a disclaimer on your website. So that's it for this week, though. I'll be back here next week for episode 62 of the Online Genius Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.